the show where we talk about the people, the projects, and the partnerships without losing culture, people, and purpose. So, Thomas, before we get going, let's start with this. Take us back to the beginning. How did you find your way into this industry?
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's where I was born and raised. It's this industry and the people in it and the culture that I have. Did I ever imagine I would be where I'm at today? I would say no. Maybe a couple customers here or there, a few crews, maybe 15, 20 people. Funny things is the leadership meeting growing up at Hall Utilities with my dad on it.
Welcome back to the Grid Connection, the show where we talk about the people, the projects, and the partnerships building the infrastructure that powers and connects rural America. I'm Andy Leake. Today, my guest is Thomas Hall. Thomas leads our Southeast Telecom operations, and he's really carrying a lot of the operations that you see across South Carolina and Georgia, which means he lives at the intersection of doing the right thing in a growing company and wrestles with continuing to build, continuing to scale, and keep winning new work without losing culture, people, and purpose that make us who we are. So that's what I want to get in today. Growth without losing what matters, leadership, culture, workforce, and why infrastructure is the most important thing people never talk about, but impacts our day-to-day life. So Thomas, before we get going, let's start with this. Take us back to the beginning. How did you find your way into this industry?
Good morning, Andy. And yeah, it's been a long time. I feel like I started back in this industry officially getting paid to do this in '05. My family has been around this industry their entire life. My granddad did it in the military. We'll get into that a little bit later as we get into some of the other stuff that we're going to go over. But it's just been really it's where I was born and raised. It's this industry and the people in it and the culture that I have. Some of the customers I have that I still work with today have been around since I was born. So it's a little bit of a passion of mine.
Nice. So what with that, you mentioned your family attracted you to this line of work. It's been kind of a multi-generational thing. Did you ever imagine in those early years that you'd be in the role you're in today, in the company size and kind of all the customers and impacts? Because really you've had a really deep impact in your area there. And how did you think about that as you started out?
So, did I ever imagine I would be where I'm at today? I would say no. My ultimate goal when I started in this industry was to own my own company. That was, because granddad and great uncle started it in the '70s. My dad took it over in the early 2000s. When he got ready to retire, that was where I thought I was going to go. Was owning the company, but I was not at the time. It was not the time or place to do that for me. Um, but the scale in which I am in control of now, no, never fathomed it. It was, maybe a couple customers here or there, a few crews, maybe 15, 20 people. That was kind of what I was thinking my life was going to anticipate. Now there's close to 100 guys down here working around on different projects, not to mention the subcontractors. So the scale is immensely greater than what I ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple, I would call them mentors, leaders, those who have helped you down the path, in the family. So feel free to go with those, or maybe any others that have come along and helped you down that path. So as you think about that, any double click into who they are, how they've impacted you, lessons learned, and things you've really brought into who you are in your career today.
Yeah. So the two I would say most staple and standout mentors for me were my father and grandfather. My granddad was always a guide in how to deal with people. I never saw him get mad at people. I never saw him get angry or upset. If he was upset, you didn't really know it. He would he would be mad at you and you would be disappointed because he was mad at you. And you just because of something simple he said. And so that was a guide that I learned from there. He was always willing to make something work. My dad was an example of work. I mean, the man would get to the office at 4 o'clock in the morning and leave at 10 o'clock at night, but also make time to do other things to make sure that the guys were taken care of, the equipment was taken care of, we were getting paid on time. And so but I come from, even on my mom's side, everybody in my family is a small business owner. On my mom's side, we have loggers, mechanics, truck drivers. they all own their own business. They all work for themselves. So really and truly working and learning what we do, that's what I have done my whole life. And it's been taught to me by every leader in my life, every man that grew up around me, uncles and grandfathers on both sides.
That's a great pathway to the very next topic is talking about balancing growth, maintaining culture, creating opportunities. So, we've talked a little bit about kind of the path from a smaller business to a larger business. There's obviously some cultural things that are different between the two. So as you think about that, like let's call it the dichotomy between those two, how have you seen ElectriCom or really hall construction morphing into what is now, ElectriCom? How have you seen that culture move and grow, but also continue to be successful throughout that process?
Yeah, so one of the funny things is the leadership meeting growing up at Hall Utilities when my dad owned it was at the dinner table at night when we got back to the house, and he was yelling at me about something I did wrong or telling me I did a good job on something. And you know, the it's a little different culture. I can't just walk down the hallway, because when I started working for my dad, I was still at home. And, hey, we got a customer complaint. I'll go take care of it. Now I'm dealing with a whole different ball game. The key to not losing what I've seen is the growth is you got to keep treating everybody like family, and which is one of our core values of Electricom. You have to keep making sure that everybody around you is important and everybody around you knows they're important to you. Because if they feel like they're lost, they're a cog in the wheel, or it doesn't matter, then they're going to quit, going after things for you. So, one of the big things that I try to keep, as a leadership in the Greenwood office is a little hard for me for some of my outside offices, but where I'm based out of, every morning before work starts, I'm in there at 6 with the guys, just shooting the crap, just talking, chit chatting, not asking about work, what we're doing today or tomorrow. Sometimes I just sit there and listen to the complaints because they want to feel heard. I don't do anything about it. I go to my second line leaders and be like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. I don't know what y'all are doing about it because they still have to have a key in it and a role as well. But that's something I learned from my dad, because the family dinner table was our business meetings. So, being heard is an extremely important part for the guys to keep the culture. It's also the easiest thing to lose because as you grow and as you get further away, that culture of family is harder to keep because, yes, as you grow, the importance of money becomes real because you got to have cash flow to keep things going. And sometimes the guys don't understand that we have to do things we don't want to do. And, just because we have to keep cash flow and, keeping equipment right and everything like that. So it's hard for the guys to understand, well, why can't we do this or why can't we go out for lunch or, you know, do these things? That's the hard part is balancing the good and the bad for the guys so they can understand it.
Yeah, communication. That's what I heard on repeat there is communication, communication, communication. So as we look at our industry and how it's morphing in real time, you mentioned Greenwood office, there's a high concentration of employees there. And as we're thinking about kind of the industry as a whole is rather nomadic, right? Let's just call it what it is, right? How do you see ElectriCom, the industry as a whole, maintaining that consistency of communication across, let's call it teams, projects, regions, as the work, and it moves from one area to the next to the next. I think all companies in our industry have experienced that at least once, and will continue to experience that. But I'd call it consistency in communication across areas when there's maybe a geographic divide that you maybe can't have that every morning around the coffee pot, if you would.
And so what I would say is the most important people in your industry are your middle management leaders because they are the direct envoy from management to your guys in the field. And they have to keep what's important, which is the communication, which is the caring, the ownership, the family orientation. Those are your most important people. If you promote bad middle management, you're going to lose projects, you're going to lose crews, you're going to lose subcontractors. I've seen it over the years. 20 years in the industry now, I've seen one person throw away $1 million contracts, throw away contractors that are the greatest person in the world, But I've also seen one person come in and step in and save those things and make those people feel like making your customer feel like they're the most important person to you, even though you have 5 customers and every one of them feel that way, is the hardest thing in the world to do. But if you train and you promote within the people who care about the same things that you care about as an industry, you'll continue to win. So that's how you keep that culture as you go out. It's training that next level of leaders. And ElectriCom's done a great job with me on that. They've given me the opportunities to grow. They've sent me to different leadership schools. They've given me books to read and study. And the big part is you can't teach people to want to. So you have to find the people that want to and grow those people. Not everybody's meant to be a manager. Some people are meant to just be an operator. They're really good operators. Just leave them there. Don't force them into something because then you'll create somebody who's going to fail, and then that's going to make things worse. And as people fail, they start grabbing for things and they'll pull anything with them as they go.
That is very true. Very true. So, what I heard there is investing in your people, protecting your people, growing with your people is the key to both maintaining your culture as well as scaling the business, growing the business, and then inevitably you will have those rocky times. But creating that trust in the meantime is what helps you get through that. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of scaling the business, growing the business, but you kind of already got us there in terms of workforce development. So as we think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is going back to moving outside of a core geography and companies scaling but also protecting the people, thinking about safety standards. How do we empower those who are in that middle management that you mentioned there to protect the production, protect the safety, protect the crews, and also be consistent in those projects as they go out and they scale? How have you been successful in doing that, and also how can we learn from maybe some challenges that you've encountered along the way where something didn't go well to ensure that we have success into the future?
So I'm gonna back up a little bit into my career back when I worked with my dad. And the biggest thing that I've learned and the best way to grow your leadership is to allow for failure. And so one of the examples I got, my dad allowed me to go out and bid some projects. We won a project for Hart Telephone, who is currently one of our customers, back in 2012. And I hit a home run. I went out and I bid the job. I estimated it was going to take us 2 months to do it. We came in, we knocked it out in 4 weeks. I finished on top of the world. It was an amazing project. Everything went great. Dad looked at me, he said, "All right, go find the next one." So I went out and I started looking around and I went out and I bid a job. I bid a job in the southern part of South Carolina. I went and looked at the job. I said, "Yep, we can do it." We went out. Yeah, well, we didn't. We went out and lost about $40,000 in about 2 months, and which is a lot of money for our company at the size we were. And my dad just looked at me and said, "All right, find a stopping point. We're going to get out of this. We got to go away. We got to learn from our mistakes." But he allowed me, he saw that there was a chance that something could go wrong, but he put enough trust in me to allow me to do it. But he also didn't let me dig a hole so deep it bankrupts the company. He stepped in, allowing that. So a lot of times, and it's hard for me because I'm extremely hands-on with my projects. I can tell you what mostly is going on with any of my projects at any time. Allowing that person to make a failing step, but not allowing them to fall too far, allows them to understand that, oh, he trusts me. Even if I do something wrong, he trusts me. He's going to have my back. He's not gonna, you know, throw me under the bus. And that's another big part of growing your leaders. When you have a problem, and I'm going to use the CEO of the phone company comes to me and saying they have a problem with my guys. That's my problem. That's not my guy's problem. I'm like, yes, sir, I'll fix it. I must have miscommunicated something, and you have their back all the way down. Now, that closed door meeting with that other supervisor might go a little differently than that, but they can understand that to the customer, everything was your fault. And that, when it comes down the hill, it stops with you. And then you just guide, lead, and direct. And that's, making sure that the people feel that you have their back and you're going to take care of them is one of the most important things in the world, but also letting them feel they can make a decision, because the most important thing in middle management is make a decision, because sitting will kill you. if you don't make a decision and I mean, if it's wrong, you can come back from it, but sitting there just does nothing but just cost you money, time, and nothing's happening. So that right there is one of the key things I think to being able to do stuff.
There's a lot of golden nuggets in there. Hopefully, those that are listening go back and rewind because there's a lot in there. So before we move off of this section, I'd be amiss if we didn't talk a little bit about safety. Right, safety is critical to our industry, making sure everybody goes home. How have you seen effective safety aspects of the job not just be a requirement, thou shall, but also part of the culture and what the crews and folks are buying into as we, move out of a core geography, or somebody's just on a job that maybe is a little farther out. They have to be safety minded themselves because it's critical that everybody goes home safe, right? How have you seen safety be bought into and really a day to day life as opposed to a demand from on high?
Yep. So safety, obviously coming from small town, just my dad owned the company. The safety culture wasn't the greatest thing. Safety lessons around haul utility was don't put your fingers where you don't want to lose them. Stay out of the way of moving equipment. And if it looks unsafe, just don't do it. But when I come to ElectriCom, I started getting ingrained into a safety culture and seeing that grow. And the biggest thing that I've seen work is, making safety important because the ultimate goal is to send everybody home with 10 fingers, 10 toes, and alive and happy and healthy, and expressing that. And one of the things I've seen, and because I've started tiptoeing into the power side and meeting some of those industries, they do an amazing job with safety culture on the power side and making it mean something to home. And one of the ways I've seen that grow is they had the linemen get their kids to draw artwork on their glove bag so that when they pick their gloves up every day, they know that they're doing this and wearing those gloves and checking them out and making sure that there's no leaks in them, so they go home to those kids. And making safety culture about that, where it's you are your brother's keeper. Everybody on that crew is a family. You spend more time with the people at work than you do with your family 90% of the time. So those people are important to you, whether you want to admit it or not. You might not like them some days, and y'all might argue like cats and dogs, but that's what family does. And so watching the guys now, through the years, they care a little more. Hey, man, I'd park that truck 2 more feet off the road, put a cone out, you know, little things like that. And where that starts in an industry is with management. When I show up to a job site now, and I used to be the world's worst about it, I'm only gonna be here for 30 seconds. I'm gonna hop out and tell the guys what to do, and I'm gonna hop back in and go down the road. Now I make sure that when I step out of that truck, I put my vest on. I put my hard hat on. I make sure I got my safety glasses or my, sunglasses on, depending on where we're at. And I go talk to the guys and I make sure the first thing I talk about now is, hey guys, your work zone looks great, but I think we could use a few more cones or something like that. Because if your management says that safety is important, that's going to be important. And also, if you show up and the guy's not doing the right thing, not just blessing them out about it, but pulling them to the side and talking to them about why that can take, you know, that extra 2 seconds can save you a lifetime of hurt and harm. I've seen some bad industry injuries. I've seen some bad stuff happen to guys. And so you don't want to see that happen to anybody else.
Absolutely. Safety first, all day, every day. No compromise.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
let's move into rural infrastructure. That is the bread and butter of ElectriCom. That is where we live, work, and play. So it is very critical to how we go to market, how we interact with our customers, and ultimately how it benefits our employee base. So let's start with just probably a basic question right off the top. Why is rural infrastructure so important?
Well, as a person who lives in rural America, I mean, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Without rural infrastructure and the infrastructure acts that happened in the late 40s, I wouldn't have power. I'd be trying to either get a well or, something off solar, different things like that. I wouldn't have telephone. Now I have fiber. It's awesome. Finally, it only took me 20 years to get it, but um, I can stay at my house. I can work from home if I need to be. I can also have things like, you know, right now I'm traveling and I have my garden set up on a timer that's hooked to Wi-Fi so that it can come on at certain times of day and water my garden. Those little things in life, you don't realize how nice they are. Yes, they're conveniences, but they make things matter. But then you also have like my family has kids that are in school. Well, when they have out days, they have to stay at home and do it, do their studying. They can't do that. There was no internet. We had dial-up before we got the fiber down there to the house. All we had was dial-up. You couldn't do anything with it. It was awful. We would tried satellite TV or satellite internet back in the day. Didn't work. Things have changed now a little bit, but it's still that infrastructure. Also, it's a connection to community. The co-ops that we work for, they are all community. All those guys that work for them, they come from your local community. That when you go down the road and you're working in their yards, they're like, oh, do you know Billy Bob? He's so and so, and he's on this crew with this guy. They know everybody, and then it's a family culture. And working for co-ops, that's one of the most important things. Is you're taking something that these people desperately need in order to continue their life. That's why rural infrastructure is important.
And you named a lot of things. So maybe let's click into a few of those, right? You talked about schools, you talked about healthcare, businesses, families. Can you think of a couple examples in your rural community where having the increased connectivity, whether that's in the fiber, whether that's extending power out, has made an impact that you could see from when you were a kid to today? There's a business going that maybe couldn't have otherwise been going in the area. There's been jobs created, those types of things that you could point to an example in your area that has happened and blessed the community, if you would, as a result of this infrastructure build out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have small rural communities like what we live in, and then you'll have an industrial park. So prime example, there's an industrial park down in McCormick County. When I say it's in the middle of nowhere, this industrial park is in the middle of nowhere. And the reason that this industrial park can be in the middle of nowhere is because Little River Electric Co-op and West Carolina, Telephone Co-op, they had the infrastructure built out there to them to maintain, sustain this industrial park that's in the middle of nowhere, which allows the community of McCormick, which is not one of the largest thriving counties in the state of South Carolina, to have something that will grow and become more. There's a tech industry in there now. I'm not exactly what they do, but it has some kind of tech thing with microchips and processing those in there. That takes a lot of data and it takes a lot of power. And so without these rural co-ops going to them, there's no way around it. The other thing is one of our other customers has put fiber up on to every meter at their house. Well, you go to these little meters and you go out in the middle of nowhere and there's these kids that didn't have TV because there was no cable TV. Dish doesn't work out there and anything like that. And you see these kids that are now able to stay at home, do stuff, learn things because they're allowed to study from home, do different stuff. Also with the growing homeschooling, lots of that goes home to you right there, right? I mean,
Hmm.
homeschooling is important, and it gives the option for these parents to learn more things, to do more things, to be able to reach out into these homeschool communities because now they can do it. I'm currently in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. My brother lives in Bonesteel. Rural co-ops, they don't get no more rural than this. The community, the town he lives in, the actual township itself is a population of 200 or less. And so they have fiber everywhere out here. Then the local rural co-op for the power, there's power to every house out here, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And that is what it touches and bases. My brother now has internet at home, and his kids they only go to school 4 days a week. On Friday, it's like away learning, and so without that, his kids couldn't do it. So that right there is how it touches the community and the life.
Impactful is what I would
Hmm.
say after listening to that. It sounds like the work that we do each day touches many aspects of life and is critical. So let's move that a little bit into how that work gets done. Right. So folks drive down the road, they see construction crews, they see folks invest. I've heard it myself is, man, construction takes forever. Guys are just standing around in a circle talking about nothing, not doing any work. So let's start with that. misconceptions about construction, utility construction. What do people not realize about what's really happening either behind the scenes, in those crew circles as they're preparing to do work? What's a major misconception that you see that folks should know about?
The biggest misconception is that we don't care. We're just out there doing it, just tearing up the people's yard for no reason whatsoever. But there's a lot that went into this. People think that there is no thought process before we get out there on the field, before we start digging the hole. Man, I've been in this industry forever. It starts well before that. Some of the biggest projects I've been on, well, they may be 2 years of planning into this to do service studies to see where the most impactful hit is, to see where we can go to help the people the most. And then once we start that 2 years later, some things have changed. Then we spend months trying to get, permits to go down this road or that road, or we're spending time with locators. We're calling in stuff and getting locates called in well in advance so that we can make a plan to best go down the road. And, nobody out there is doing this maliciously. We're not out there digging up your flowers. We're not out there, moving your mailboxes just because. We're doing it because there's a plan, there's a path that we have to go down. Things have to be by standards and specs. When we do these state road right of ways, the state may say, you got this 5 foot window to be in. Well, if that's where Miss Sue planted her flowers, then we have to unfortunately move those flowers because they're on state right of way. We try to do our best to be nice about it and maybe communicate up front and talk to the customers, but it's impossible if you're on a 200-mile build to talk to every single customer in that 200 miles, unless you're out there working where Isabel, our partner, works, and there's only two customers in that 200 miles. There's a difference there. But we try to communicate. We try to be upfront with the customers. We want to be nice. But one thing our customers don't understand is those poor guys are out there on the field, especially this time of the year when it's 102, 103 degrees outside and they're working. There's no shade in any direction. They're not exactly always the nicest people when it's 100 degrees and they're sweating and digging. But that's why, having the right foreman, the right guy who can be a de-escalator, that's the most important job on that. But the biggest misconception is that we're just out there and we're doing whatever we're going to do, and it doesn't matter what other people think. It does matter what other people think to us because these are our communities. Going back to the rule of structure, the biggest customers that I work for, they are my communities. That's where I live. I know the people that I'm working with. I know the people I'm digging the holes in their yard, and I have to listen to it at church or at Sunday dinner or those places. We care about what's going on. I promise.
Yeah. So the planning and coordination and expertise is very involved. There's a lot of coordination, I guess you would say, between not only the construction company but the municipalities, the utilities, those types of things. And it's not just show up and we'll see what happens today, right? So multiple choice question here before we move off this topic here is, how would you rate or give an example of a successful project that kind of exemplified all of those aspects? Or maybe what was a surprise on a project that maybe caused a second look at the original planning and coordination and had to go back and say, okay, we have a problem and now let's go solve it in this way. So kind of a multiple choice there for you that you can go either direction.
So a project that we just recently finished wrapping up for one of our customers was about a 250-mile build, and it was a pretty aggressive time frame. And so there was a lot of coordination and planning. Some of it was completely rural, some of it was through cities. So there's a little bit more, to deal with when you get in the cities and municipalities, especially some of these older cities in South Carolina that don't know where anything is because it was put in the 50s and it still works. So they haven't touched it. And so that project took a lot of coordination and a lot of growing. And one of the things we did was we put together a touch point meeting every day and with my leadership in the field so that we could keep on track of what we're doing. Because, of course, number one goal for ElectriCom, make the customer happy, hit the dates with the least amount of damage as possible. And so we planning meeting every afternoon where we would talk about, hey, what went good today? What went bad? Where are we going next? What are we seeing as the problem in the future? And once we did that, now Granted, it took 3 months of doing things the wrong way to figure out we needed to do this. But that's one of those things where you learn. I just got to looking at it, and I'm like, man, I'm calling the same people, asking the same questions, 4 times in a row. Let's just get everybody on a meeting at once. It's a 20-minute, 30-minute meeting, and then we find out the problems for the next day. And what went so good about it is we finished that 250-mile build. We actually came in about a month ahead of time with a very aggressive build schedule, completely done when we were done, and everybody was happy, and the customer was happy, and we ended up with small. You're always going to have problems. We hit a water main that was 9 foot off the mark, and yeah, it shut a road down. Well, that happens. You're going to have those things happen. But what ElectriCom does, and we push as a team, is when that happened, we started helping the water company. We started helping them set up the closures. We started helping them get ahead of the things so that when they showed up, they didn't have to do anything but work, so that the customers got home faster, so that we're not having people out of damage or out of service longer than what we can. And that's the biggest thing that I've seen as ElectriCom we do very well is, yeah, we might have messed up, but at the same time, we're going to help you fix our mess up, because those customers, those people that are complaining to you about not having water or not having power or not having fiber, those are also going to be our customers in the future. So we need to take care of them.
Communication. That's what I heard.
Yes.
We started the
Yes.
conversation with communication. We've had that same theme throughout, and we're back right at it. So that's critical. So let's continue to communicate to let's call it the next generation of folks coming into the industry. Right. So we all know the amount of work that's going on in the utility industry as a whole, not just our utilities, but as a whole, continues to face workforce challenges. And there's a lot that goes into that. So let's dive into that. But that goes both to just let's call it skilled workers, those who are already trained, as well as those coming into the industry. So as we think about that, is what have you seen in the industry, how it's evolved over the course of your 20 years in the industry, as folks have come in, folks have learned, folks have retired, and then layer that into why the younger crowd, I guess you could say, coming into the industry and maybe not considering utility contracting as a viable path for them. How has it evolved, and why should they consider it?
Yeah. So the big thing is our generation. We were taught college was the most important thing you could ever see, want, or desire. Without a college degree, you can't do anything. You're going to be nothing. And it was preached and preached and preached. And, to the point where most kids coming out of high school, they think they have to go to college. Like there's no other option. There's no other way around that. If they don't go to college, they're not going to have anything. Well, the, the change in the industry is the industry pays well. People don't realize that. People don't listen to the opportunities or the ability. It's I have no college degree. I went for 6 months and that was a mistake. Shouldn't have done it. I grew up in this industry and I learned a skill and I learned a trade and I continued to grow myself. And it put me in a position where I'm working for a company that takes care of me and I make a very good living for my family and my life. But people don't see that as an option. And so they don't understand that they get in there and they work and they learn something. They learn a trade, no different than going to school. It still takes 4 to 5 years of learning it, and you gotta earn your stripes. But the difference is if you go to college, you're gonna spend those 4 to 5 years building up debt. Whereas if you go in the trades, you're gonna spend those 4 to 5 years making money and learning a process that's gonna teach you at the same time. With our trade, it's a little different. There's not a lot of certifications. There's not a lot of, this and that you need to get in. You just got to have a hard working attitude and a will to learn. Um, but with that being said, the hardest thing is the people who taught me in the trades. I come from a family that it was okay to be yelled at, and if you're not doing it right, just get over it, suck it up, buttercup, and move on. And the kids today are not, they don't respond to that the same way. And it's a learning thing. And some of our older hands that are teaching, that are the foremans, that are the lead operators, yeah, they're old guys and they're aging out. But that's how they learn, and they can't understand how to communicate with these young guys who don't get it the same way. Some of them want opportunities to fail, like what I talked about earlier, and they want that opportunity to go out there and try things. And patience is one of the things that does not come very, very long on a job site. When it's hot, you're ready to go home. You're not trying to give that guy a chance to learn what he's doing. You just rather get him, knock him out of the way, go ahead and do it yourself, and then go home for the day. But that's the biggest thing that I would say is that's the hardest challenge is integrating the young generation into the old generation and teaching them how to communicate with each other. There's a few guys that do it great. I got a couple foremen that take those young kids and train them, and they show them everything, and they want to teach them, they want them to learn, they want them to do more. And then I got some that just don't have time to listen to them, don't care what they're going to do. And you see the new guys on their crews, they don't. It takes them 5 years to learn, whereas the new guys on the crews that teach, you see a year to 2 years, those guys are starting to run mini X's. They're starting to run the directional drill. They're locating. And so the teacher mentality, which is not, it doesn't come natural to everybody. That's the most important part of the job, but also patience. And it's one thing I don't have a lot of, but I've had to learn since being in this industry. Patience is the most important thing for a foreman on a job site. And man, it can be tough. I'm having to learn it again with now I got a 2 year old at home and trying to teach him different things. And we're potty training right now. And I'm like, why don't you get it? You should just understand. We've been doing this for 6 months now. It should be just natural. But it's not. So patience is key. And blue collar jobs to most kids today, they see them as dirty, grimy, gritty, don't make any money. They're not happy about it. But I'm actually starting to see a change in that a little bit because of the TikToks and the YouTubes and the stuff out there where they're taking these videos and they're videoing their lifestyles, how they're making good money, how they're, able to go out and grow their families and stuff because of the jobs they have. So you're starting to see a little bit of a trend back to where blue collar jobs are important. You know, Also, one good thing about a blue collar job is AI is not coming for your ditch diggers anytime soon. Whereas some of your white collar jobs and the coders and the finance people, they have a legitimate fear of AI. But I still haven't figured out, they haven't figured out how to dig a hole, with AI yet. It's probably coming at some point, but right now it's the safest industry to grow.
Yeah, that you have a lot of really good advice in there. So I'll end this section with this question: is if there is a, let's call him a senior in high school, a junior in high school who stumbles upon this, and there's one thing that you could say to them about their career path into the future, what's maybe 10 or 15 seconds of the number one advice you'd give to them if they would consider this industry?
So what I would give to them as advice is if you think you like being outside, you don't want to be trapped in a module or a cubicle, and you want to be able to grow and do something different. In this industry, it will be different every day. You get to learn something new all the time, and it changes greatly. I enjoy it because I get to see how I impact other people's lives and make things better.
Awesome. Thanks. So as we go to wrap, I just have one final question here, which is, as you think about the future of the industry, you think about the future of infrastructure as a whole, what excites you the most? And what do you see as the biggest challenge that we will have to overcome?
What excites me the most is just the amount that there is still to yet come in this industry, even though it feels like, yes, we built the whole state. We built the whole this and that. There's something new coming. There's always the next thing. So when I first got into this, we were wrapping up the last of the copper builds, the last of the big copper builds for these co-ops and stuff. And that was the upgrade that was going to last forever. And then 4 years later, here comes fiber, and we're starting these fiber builds. And so we build all the fiber now. Well, now there's hollow core fiber. It's even faster. It's even better. It's even carrying more. So there's always growth. There's expansion, and which is why it's a good reason to get in this industry because there's always something new coming. But that's probably the biggest excitement. My biggest fear is, or I guess worry is workforce and the ability to maintain projects and to be timely with things because as an industry and even our competitors, we've met a lot of really, really high expectations over the last few years and build rates and things. And once you do it once, it's just, well, need more next time, need more next time, need more next time. And at some point, you get to a breaking point where you can't maintain a good product and the speed, So that's probably my biggest fear in this industry is that we've worked ourselves into a point where we never stop now, and faster, faster, faster is all everybody knows.
That's great feedback. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, sharing your perspective on leadership, workforce development, and the important role that infrastructure plays in rural communities. And for those that are listening, if you're enjoying these conversations, be sure to subscribe to the Grid Connection, follow along as we continue to explore people, projects, and partnerships as we build the infrastructure that empowers rural America. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, Andy. Have a good day.
Absolutely.